The rain was relentless, pounding against the roof of the small suburban house like 1,000 tiny fists. Inside, Daniel Harper sat on his couch, a half-empty cup of coffee in his hands, staring blankly at the flickering television screen. The news anchor droned on about some political scandal, but Daniel wasn't paying attention. His mind was elsewhere, lost in the monotony of his life. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. It was a cycle he had grown accustomed to, though not one he particularly enjoyed. The knock at the door startled him. At first, he thought it was his imagination. Who would be out in this weather? But then it came again, louder this time, more insistent. Daniel set his coffee down and stood, his heart inexplicably racing. He wasn't expecting anyone, and his friends rarely visited unannounced. Cautiously, he approached the door, peering through the peephole. What he saw made him freeze. Standing on his porch was a woman, or at least, something that resembled a woman. She was tall, her skin a pale, almost luminescent blue, with faint patterns that seemed to shift and swirl like constellations. Her eyes were large and almond-shaped, glowing faintly in the dim light. She was dressed in a flowing silver garment that clung to her slender frame, and her long, silvery hair was plastered to her head by the rain. But what caught Daniel's attention most was her stomach, round and swollen, unmistakably pregnant. For a moment, he thought he was hallucinating. Maybe he'd fallen asleep on the couch and this was some bizarre dream. But the woman knocked again, harder this time, and the sound was too real to be anything but. Swallowing his fear, Daniel opened the door. The woman, creature, whatever she was, stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. She moved with an otherworldly grace, her bare feet leaving faint, glowing prints on the wooden floor. Daniel stared at her, his mouth dry, his mind racing. He wanted to say something, to ask who she was or what she wanted, but the words caught in his throat. She turned to face him, her glowing eyes locking onto his. When she spoke, her voice was soft but commanding, with an accent he couldn't place. "Did you think you could escape?" The question sent a chill down his spine. Escape? Escape what? He had no idea what she was talking about, but the way she said it made it sound like he should. I don't understand," he stammered, taking a step back. "Who are you? What do you want?" She tilted her head, studying him as if he were a puzzle she was trying to solve. "You do not remember," she said, more to herself than to him. "But you will." Before he could respond, she placed a hand on her stomach, her expression softening. "I need your help," she said. "Our child is coming, and I cannot do this alone." Daniel's mind reeled. Our child? What was she talking about? He had never seen this woman, this alien, before in his life. How could he be the father of her child? "There's been a mistake," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "I don't know who you are, but I can't be." She cut him off with a sharp look. "You are the one," she said firmly. "The bond was formed, whether you remember it or not. And now, you must fulfill your role." Daniel opened his mouth to protest, but the words died on his lips as she suddenly doubled over, clutching her stomach. A low, pained moan escaped her, and for the first time, she looked vulnerable. Whatever she was in pain, and despite his confusion and fear, Daniel couldn't just stand there and do nothing. "Are you okay?" he asked, stepping closer. "Do you need, I don't know, a doctor or something?" She shook her head, straightening with effort. "Your kind cannot help me," she said. "But you can. You must." Daniel didn't know what to do. This was beyond anything he had ever experienced, beyond anything he had ever imagined. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw something, desperation, maybe, or hope. And against his better judgment, he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Tell me what to do." The alien woman, she still hadn't given him a name, led him to the living room, where she settled onto the couch with a sigh of relief. Daniel hovered awkwardly, unsure of what to do next. He had no idea how to help a pregnant alien give birth, and the thought of trying filled him with dread. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "There is much you need to know." Daniel obeyed, perching on the edge of the seat. His mind was a whirlwind of questions, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Who are you?" he asked again. "And why do you think I'm the father of your child?" She studied him for a moment, her glowing eyes piercing. "My name is Lyra," she said finally. "And you are Daniel Harper, of Earth. We met once, though you do not remember." Daniel frowned. "I think I'd remember meeting an alien." Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. "Your memories were erased," she explained. "It was necessary to protect you, and us. But the bond we formed cannot be undone. It is why I came to you now." "Bond?" Daniel repeated, his confusion deepening. "What kind of bond?" Lyra placed a hand on her stomach, her expression softening. "Our kind forms bonds with those we choose to share our lives with," she said. "It is a deep, spiritual connection that transcends time and space. When we met, we formed such a bond. And now, our child is the result of that union." Daniel shook his head, struggling to process what she was saying. "But I don't remember any of this," he said. "How can I be responsible for something I don't even remember?" "The bond exists whether you remember it or not," Lyra said gently. "And now, our child needs you. I cannot do this alone." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, feeling overwhelmed. "Okay, let's say I believe you," he said. "What exactly do you need me to do?" Lyra leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "Our child is special," she said. "A hybrid of our two species. The birth will not be easy, and I will need your strength to see it through." Daniel's heart raced. "You want me to help you give birth?" he asked, his voice rising in panic. "I don't know anything about that. I'm not a doctor." "You do not need to be," Lyra said calmly. "The bond will guide you. You need only to trust it." Daniel didn't know what to say. This was insane. Impossible. And yet, as he looked at Lyra, he felt a strange sense of connection, as if some part of him recognized her on a deeper level. It was unsettling, but also oddly comforting. "Okay," he said finally, though he still wasn't sure he believed any of this. "What do we do first?" Lyra smiled, a genuine expression of relief. "First, we prepare," she said. "The birth will be soon, and we must be ready." Over the next few hours, Lyra guided Daniel through a series of preparations that felt more like a ritual than anything else. She had him gather candles, which she arranged in a circle around the living room. She instructed him to draw symbols on the floor with chalk, strange, intricate patterns that seemed to glow faintly in the candlelight. And she had him bring her a bowl of water, which she infused with a shimmering, silver substance she produced from a small vial. As they worked, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was in over his head. This was all so far outside his realm of experience, and he had no idea what to expect. But Lyra seemed confident, and her calm demeanor helped to steady his nerves. "What are these symbols?" he asked as he finished drawing one of the patterns. "They are ancient," Lyra explained. "Part of a ritual that will help to stabilize the energy during the birth. Our child is a bridge between two worlds, and the process of bringing them into this reality is delicate." Daniel nodded, though he didn't fully understand. "And the water?" he asked, gesturing to the bowl. "It is infused with a substance that will help to ease the pain," Lyra said. "And to strengthen the bond between us." Daniel frowned. "You're in pain?" Lyra hesitated, then nodded. "The birth is difficult," she admitted. "But I will endure. I must." Daniel felt a pang of sympathy. Despite everything, he couldn't help but admire her strength. "Is there anything else I can do?" he asked. Lyra smiled. "You are doing well," she said. "But there is one more thing. When the time comes, you must be ready to give me your energy. My energy? Daniel repeated, confused. The bond we share allows us to share our strength, Lyra explained. When the moment arrives, I will need you to focus on that connection and channel your energy to me. It will help me to endure the process. Daniel nodded, though he still wasn't entirely sure what that meant. Okay, he said. I'll do my best. Lyra reached out and took his hand, her touch surprisingly warm. Thank you, Daniel, she said softly. I know this is difficult for you, but I am grateful for your help. Daniel felt a strange warmth spread through him at her words, and he realized that, despite his fear and confusion, he wanted to help her. There was something about her, something that made him feel connected to her in a way he couldn't explain. We'll get through this, he said, squeezing her hand. Together. Lyra smiled, and for a moment, the fear and uncertainty seemed to fade away. But then she suddenly stiffened, her grip on his hand tightening as a look of pain crossed her face. It is time, she said, her voice strained. The child is coming. The next few hours were a blur of chaos and intensity. Lyra's pain grew with each passing moment, and Daniel did his best to support her, though he felt utterly out of his depth. He followed her instructions as best he could, holding her hand, speaking words of encouragement, and trying to focus on the bond she had spoken of. At one point, Lyra instructed him to place his hands on her stomach, and as he did, he felt a strange, pulsing energy beneath his palms. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced, warm and alive, but also powerful, almost overwhelming. He could feel the life within her, and it filled him with a sense of awe and wonder. Focus, Lyra said, her voice strained. Channel your energy to me. Daniel closed his eyes, trying to do as she asked. He focused on the connection he felt with her, on the warmth and strength that seemed to flow between them. It was difficult at first, but as he concentrated, he began to feel a sense of calm, as if he were tapping into something deep within himself. The hours passed in a haze of pain and effort, but finally, after what felt like an eternity, the child was born. Daniel watched in stunned silence as Lyra cradled the newborn in her arms, her face glowing with a mixture of exhaustion and joy. The child was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Their skin was a soft, shimmering blue, like Lyra's, but with faint, golden patterns that seemed to shift and change as they moved. Their eyes were large and luminous, and when they looked at Daniel, he felt a strange sense of recognition, as if the child already knew him. They're beautiful, Daniel said softly, his voice filled with awe. Lyra smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. They are, she agreed. And they are yours as much as they are mine. Daniel felt a lump form in his throat. Despite the strangeness of the situation, he couldn't deny the connection he felt to the child, and to Lyra. It was as if they were a part of him, in a way he couldn't fully understand. What happens now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra looked at him, her expression serious. Now, we protect them, she said. There are those who would seek to harm our child, to use them for their own purposes. We must keep them safe. Daniel nodded, a sense of determination settling over him. I'll do whatever it takes, he said. I promise. Lyra smiled, and for the first time since she had arrived on his doorstep, Daniel felt a sense of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew that he would face them, not just for Lyra and the child, but for himself as well. In the days that followed, Daniel's life changed in ways he could never have imagined. Lyra and the child, whom they named Kale, stayed with him, and though their presence was a constant reminder of the strange and incredible events that had brought them together, Daniel found himself growing more and more attached to them. Kale was a curious and lively child, with a personality that seemed to grow and develop at an astonishing rate. They were fascinated by the world around them, and Daniel spent hours playing with them, teaching them about Earth and its many wonders. Lyra, meanwhile, was a constant source of strength and wisdom, guiding Daniel as he navigated the challenges of their new life together. But despite the joy they brought, there was always an undercurrent of danger. Lyra had warned him that there were those who would seek to harm Cale, and though they had seen no sign of any threat, Daniel knew they couldn't let their guard down. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Daniel turned to Lyra. "What happens if they find us?" he asked, his voice tinged with worry. Lyra looked at him, her expression calm but serious. "We will face them," she said. "Together. And we will protect Cale, no matter what." Daniel nodded, feeling a surge of determination. He had never considered himself a particularly brave or strong person, but for Lyra and Cale, he knew he would do whatever it took. As he looked at them, Lyra with her serene strength, and Cale with their boundless curiosity, he felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. This was his family now, and he would do everything in his power to keep them safe. The road ahead would not be easy, but Daniel knew that, together, they could face whatever challenges came their way. And as he held Cale in his arms, he felt a sense of hope and possibility that filled him with a quiet, steady resolve. This was just the beginning of their journey, a journey that would take them to places they could never have imagined, and test them in ways they could never have anticipated. But whatever lay ahead, Daniel knew one thing for certain. They would face it together.